to your first video for HRMG 545. I'm really excited to be here and to start working on content with you all related to diversity and inclusion management. So this is just going to be a high-level, quick introduction to the course and ease us into starting to think about diversity and the role that it plays within HR specifically. So what I want you to do, forward here to the next page, is I want you to really think about, what do you know about workplace diversity? So take a minute and think to yourself about what you've learned so far in this program, or what you've learned so far in your time as a college student. What do you know about workplace diversity? So I've run this exercise a few times in my in-person courses, and what the responses I tend to receive are this. Students think diversity is important. Students think diversity is helpful. They think it leads to positive outcomes, but they don't really understand how to get there. They don't really understand how to manage diversity. And just like anything else that organizations manage, diversity takes work. It takes focused effort, it takes focused initiatives, and it has to be a goal of the organization in order to work effectively. And so I'm hoping in this course to move beyond just the idea that diversity is important and instead focus on the obstacles that exist. Why is it hard to implement diversity initiatives? Why is it hard to manage diversity initiatives? And also to cover strategies and topics that work for organizations. So what can we do to be more mindful? What can we do to be more inclusive? And how can we be more strategic in our management of diversity and inclusion efforts within the workplace? Now, prior to watching this video, hopefully you've followed the other learning tasks this week and you have watched this video, The Surprising Solution to Workplace Diversity. I'm not going to play it for you here, but I did want to touch back on it in this introduction PowerPoint, because when we think about diversity and managing diversity, that PowerPoint's sort of on the nose about how organizations have tended to approach diversity. They want a quick fix. They want a one-size-fits-all solution to diversity. And that video was obviously a parody. It's not accurate. So there is no rent a minority service, and if there were, there's major issues with that being a service, right? But the point is that organizations have tended to lean toward whatever the quick fix is and have focused less on being strategic and trying to really find solutions that work for employees and that work for them. And really the takeaway is diversity management is like anything else. It is going to require investment. It is going to require resources, and organizations need to make it a priority in order for it to work the way that we want it to. So if you haven't yet watched that video, strongly encourage you to do so before you move on this week. So one reason that we care such a great deal about diversity and managing diversity is that the global nature of business, the way that business has been conducted is changing. It has rapidly been changing now for decades. And we're no longer doing business in one location. We're no longer doing business with employees or customers or stakeholders that look and think the same way we do. Everything about our world right now has become globalized. And to be effective leaders, we need to understand different viewpoints. We need to understand different ways that individuals behave, different perspectives they have. And we need to find a way to bring those ideas, perspectives, beliefs together in an inclusive way so that employees feel comfortable and feel safe, and as a result are able to be more productive and better contributors to our organization. So we really don't have the choice, so to speak, of only doing business in our backyard, right? That's not the way the world has evolved. It's not the way business has evolved. And so to be great leaders, we have to be astute and we have to be able to keep up with those trends and to manage them appropriately. So, diversity management really isn't something that can be avoided these days, particularly if you're working for large organizations which are conducting businesses, across continents, across time zones, across cultures. We need to be mindful of how those things impact our business practices. Unfortunately, there's a lot that stands in the way of good diversity management processes. And we're going to spend the first part of this course focusing on workplace exclusion. So these are really barriers that explain why individuals aren't able to fully bring themselves to work. So examples of this include stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. We're going to have more time in the semester to talk about these different phenomenon and the effect that they have on individuals. So stereotypes are shortcuts, mental shortcuts that we apply to everybody. For instance, when we say women aren't good drivers, right, those are stereotypes that we're applying to everybody. Prejudice is when we have a negative evaluation or negative feelings toward a group. So if you say, I hate women drivers, right, that elevates it from just being this shortcut mentally to an emotional reaction that's very negative and visceral. And then discrimination is the way in which we treat individuals differently. So, I don't let women drivers cut in front of me, right? And when we're merging on the highway or something like that, would be a form of discrimination, ways in which we keep people out. So we're going to spend some time this semester talking about each of these three things and how they lead to exclusion, how they impact employees' experiences, and also how they impact organizations' outcomes, and the ways in which they really get in the way of doing good diversity and inclusion work. So on the other hand, inclusion is important because it's how we bring people together. You can see here there are three different depictions. So exclusion is when we're keeping people out. Integration is when, okay, we let certain people in, but they're not really fully mixed within the organization. We're not necessarily drawing upon their experiences or their knowledge. And inclusion there, that last picture, is really where we're trying to get. When we bring people in, when we allow them to be part of the organization, when they're embedded within our operations and they contribute meaningfully, and we look to them and their ideas and their experiences to learn from them, that's inclusion. So just simply bringing diverse people together and putting them in one place, that's not inclusion, and it's probably not going to work. So we have to work to be inclusive, and we'll cover some strategies for what that means throughout the semester. In particular, we're going to follow the inclusive workplace model, which more or less values and uses individual and intergroup differences. So it's not enough, again, to just have unique and differing perspectives, but are we really using and valuing those differences? Are we making the most of them to help improve the way work is conducted? It involves cooperating with and contributing to the surrounding community. So knowing who you're engaging business with, knowing who you're serving, working in tandem with them in order to solve some broader societal goals. The inclusive workplace model also alleviates the needs of disadvantaged groups. So working to serve individuals that have been historically underrepresented or disadvantaged, trying to use work and trying to use our organizational power in order to meet the needs of individuals who need our help most in society. So it's trying to lift everybody up. It also involves collaborating with individuals, groups, and organizations across boundaries. So again, we don't work in silos. We have to be able to work collaboratively across boundaries, across cultures, across values, in order to get the work done in a way that is safe and inclusive. And then lastly, it engages in protecting the natural environment and enhancing environmental justice, because of course, in order to conduct the work on this planet we live in, we have to take care of the planet. And although I think this natural environment and environmental justice is quite important, it's not really a focus of this course. I can certainly provide you resources that you could look into if you were more interested. But just knowing that part of this broader model and approach is not just doing work and doing business and making money, but also taking care of the place in which we do the work. So this is a human resources class. You are in a human resources program, and I think HR is particularly suited for managing diversity and starting some of these initiatives and overseeing the initiatives. So HR is so important to creating an inclusive organization because it helps to provide structure to an organization, and it's really a centerpiece of providing the culture related to diversity and inclusion. So the policies that we implement, the practices that we implement, the ways in which we treat people, all of that contributes to a culture that either values or devalues diversity and inclusion. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of, the ways in which HR sort of intersects with diversity and inclusion. So the first being that a key focus of HR is developing a pipeline of diverse talent. So you might have already taken a selection course, and there are specific strategies for trying to develop a talent pool that is diverse in beliefs and experiences and values. And so oftentimes this includes targeted recruitment, trying to reach these specific groups that we want within our organization, using strategic selection tools. So we'll talk about, some tools actually do more harm than good and at times lead certain groups to be excluded from our talent pool. So we might need to change which tools we're using in order to increase the diversity within our applicant pool. So trying to reach certain groups, trying to select certain groups, all of that is within HR's purview. And then keeping those employees. So once we find them, once we've recruited them and selected them, we want them to stay. And that also falls under HR's responsibilities of keeping these employees and how do we maintain them over time? How do we help them to move up and really have the opportunity to use their knowledge and expertise for the betterment of the organization? HR is also responsible for addressing subtle discrimination and mistreatment. So subtle discrimination occurs when people are mistreated. It might not rise to the level of being illegal, but it is uncomfortable and it can hurt people. You might have heard the term microaggression. That would fall under this idea of subtle discrimination where maybe someone's ideas aren't heard, or we roll their eyes when they talk, or just generally leave the room when they come in. All of these are things that aren't illegal but are harmful for our employees. So HR is really important in trying to recognize when these things happen and trying to reduce them. So reducing bias, educating peers, creating open access for all employees. All of these are different approaches to being more inclusive. HR can also help use diversity to enhance organizational effectiveness. So again, not just having a mix of different people in the workplace, but actually understanding how to capitalize on those differences and how to use them to conduct business in a way that's more efficient, more effective, and that can help organizations grow. And then, of course, that can help us with strengthening community connections as well. So does our workforce represent the community in which we serve? And how can we use that to better understand the community we serve to better conduct business? Additionally, HR is responsible for developing accountability systems. So I think this point is I won't say most important, but really important and often forgotten in diversity management is that just like anything else, we have objectives and we need to be able to measure those objectives and outcomes. So we need to have diversity goals and know that's not just a quota. There are lots of different ways we can assess diversity and the goals that we have associated with that, but we need to follow up and measure it and make sure that we are meeting our goals. And if we're not, changes need to be made, right? Strategies need to be shifted. Oftentimes that can involve tying our DEIA efforts back to our strategic plans. So again, we're not just engaging in diversity for diversity's sake, but showing how diversity actually supports our strategic plan and other strategic goals is really important for getting buy-in, but also then for measuring and updating our goals as they come. We can also make DEIA a component of performance management. So what that means is that we can evaluate managers on how well they are hiring a diverse workforce, how well they are engaging in diversity management practices, how well they're retaining diverse talent. When we make it something that we're holding others accountable for, when it becomes part of their evaluation at the end of the year, you'd be surprised how much more time and effort they put into it. And then also HR is responsible for trainings, and training is a really important part of diversity and inclusion efforts. So we can tailor our trainings to the organizational context. So certain organizations are going to need different types of diversity and inclusion training, thinking healthcare versus education versus construction, right? They're going to have different needs. We can also use management as role models. So we have these trainings, and then we use our managers to walk the talk, to show employees how to enact these very important diversity and inclusion behaviors, and role modeling the correct language, role modeling inclusivity. And we can also use peer-to-peer influence. So here we can create actionable plans for employees to use. We can show them how to engage with other peers. We can teach them how to be allies. And using that, it's not just the manager's job to set the rules, but employees have to buy in and also make the organization an inclusive place. So we can train our employees on how to be more inclusive, how to be more ally-like, and to make the workplace better overall. And then, of course, once we know what our culture is, and we have the culture that we want to continue to propagate, then we can use selection tools to hire people who fit that culture, so that over time, this inclusive organization we created, we're able to keep it that way by selecting people who fit into that culture. So you can see here, there's a lot of responsibility involved in HR. There's a lot of overlap between what HR does and diversity management. And this is really just a very broad overview to help you start thinking about the role that HR plays in creating a diversity and management culture. But each week, over the next 8 weeks, we'll dive into these topics in more detail, and you'll have the opportunity to contribute your thoughts and experiences as well. So I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. And if you have any questions as you get started this first week, please don't hesitate to reach out and send me an email. We can set up a meeting. But I'm really looking forward to these next weeks with you all. So have a great week ahead. Have a great spring break once you finish with these week 1 activities, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care.